put some compost down, and give that soil a little time to mellow up, give the bacteria a little chance to work their way down into the soil, give your organic fertilizer a little time to start breaking down a little bit before it's time to start planting. And then when you plant, things will literally jump out of the ground and grow. Now, what do you need to grow a good garden? Well, you need lots and lots of sunlight. You need plenty of fertility, which you're going to get from a good fertilizer, and you need plenty of organic material. The way that you build that organic material initially is with something like well-rotted compost, which is what this stuff is. If you've got a very big garden, buy it in bulk. Don't buy it by the bag. It's expensive if you buy it one bag at a time. People always ask me, who has the best bulk compost out there? For my money, it is New Earth Soils and Compost. They're out on I-10 East, about halfway between 410 and 1604. I use a lot of New Earth products in my garden, around my landscape. I don't buy it from New Earth. I buy it from Stone and Soil Depot because they're selling New Earth products and they give me a lot better delivery service. But anyway, if you're looking for what I think is the very best source of bulk compost, it will be products from New Earth, regardless of who you buy them from. There are quite a few dealers out there that do carry their products. Second best would be Fertile Garden Supply. I like Fertile Garden Supply's compost very well. They make their own. It's just, I don't think it's quite as good as New Earth's. And I will look at it again tomorrow, but in the past 2 or 3 years, I've been extremely disappointed in Gardenville's compost. So, if you're asking my opinion of who is best for bulk materials in that order, it's New Earth, it's Fertile Garden Supply, and then it's Gardenville. If you're going to buy compost in a bag, this stuff from Ladybug. It's the best compost we've ever seen in a bag. We use it as the basis for our compost tea, which I'll also talk about in a minute. Look at it under the microscope pretty often to be sure what kind of microbial life there is in there. This is what John Dromgoole makes up in Austin, and it is the best compost that I've ever found. But again, if you're going to do a very big area, it gets expensive to buy it by the bag. So, what do you start out with? I start out with putting a good layer of fertilizer on the soil. My favorite fertilizer happens to be this product, although of course I recommend it in 40-pound bags rather than in these little bags. This is Medina's fertilizer. They call it Growing Green. It's Medina Granular Organic. Later this fall there will be a better fertilizer on the market, but for right now I think the Medina Granular is the best you're going to buy. This is what we use on your grass, your trees, your shrubs, everything that grows in the yard. It's the principal fertilizer that I use in my garden as well. You're sitting there saying, you said there's going to be something better a little later this fall. What's it going to be? Well, Medina's going to start making a fertilizer especially for us, and it's going to be this fertilizer with extra green sand and extra things added to it. But for now, I think that's the best you're going to find, and it is hard to overdo it. Things about organic fertilizers, they do not burn. You don't have to worry about watering them in a hurry when you put them out. You can use them any time of the year, and it is very hard to overdo it. I've got one area in my garden that's an area that I haven't planted before, and the soil is not in great shape. I put a 40-pound bag of this on about a 40-foot row in an area about this wide. And I'm sure I'll do very well with it. But some people would say, oh gosh, aren't you worried about burning things up with so much fertilizer? No, with organics, it's simply not going to happen. The other thing about organic fertilizers is they bring their own energy with them, so to speak. The miracle is not just in the nutrients that are in there, but all fertilizers, chemical or organic, have to be converted into a form that plants can absorb and use, and that is done primarily by the bacteria in the soil, by the soil microbes. Those bacteria have to have an energy source for them to grow and reproduce and carry out their metabolic functions so they can do their part to convert the fertilizer components into things that plants can absorb. Where do they get that energy? They get the energy by breaking carbon bonds. Virtually all the energy in the world is tied up in the form of carbon bonds. That doesn't matter whether it's gasoline or natural gas or diesel or coal or anything else, or the wood you burn in your fireplace. The energy that you're seeing released as heat and light, those are carbon bonds that are being broken. That's the same thing that bacteria do to get their energy, only they're decomposing some organic products, breaking the carbon bonds, and that's where they get their energy to live. A fertilizer like this brings its own organic material with it so that it gives the bacteria the energy they need. The bacteria, in turn, put back more organic material than they take. But if you're using chemical fertilizers has no organic material in it. So where do the bacteria get their energy? They break down the organic material that's already in the soil. And the level of organic material just keeps going down and down and down and down. Back around the turn of the last century, actually after that, probably 1930s and 40s for instance, the Rio Grande Valley soils had between 5 and 6% organic material in the soil. The soils were loose, they were open, they grew absolutely incredible crops. So what happened after putting 50 years of chemical fertilizer on there? Organic content of the soil these days is down to less than 0.5% in most areas. They're having horrible salt problems, they're having horrible crusting problems with the soil, and the quality, the nutritive quality of the food that's grown on those soils has diminished greatly. In fact, spinach grown in that kind of soil, I think these days they say it has about 5% of the iron that it had in it 50 or 60 years ago. So you want to stay away from chemical fertilizers. They're destroying your soil, they're destroying the organic material in your soil, and they're also creating a lot of pollution. That's one other thing I'll tell you, and I'll probably be repeating this later this season in some other seminars. But our soils contain, you don't have to remember all this, just get the general idea. But our soils contain clay particles which have a negative charge to them. And hopefully everybody remembers from early biology, chemistry, physics, whatever you took, that like charges repel and opposite charges attract. If you put negative to negative, it pushes away. You take those two magnets and you try to push them together. If you got them turned wrong, they push each other away. Positive repels positive, negative repels negative. You turn it around and they lock together. Why is that important? Our soil is full of negatively charged clay particles. When you dump a chemical fertilizer on the soil, you're putting out mainly nitrate, nitrite, and phosphate. These three chemical ions all have a negative charge to them. So what happens when your negatively charged fertilizer particle hits a negatively charged soil? There's nothing to bind it there. And about 90% of that chemical fertilizer washes away. Well, it's bad enough that you've just wasted 90% of your fertilizer, but where does this fertilizer go? It goes down into our water supply, goes in the aquifers, runs down the rivers and creeks. And most of you will probably know this, but where the Mississippi empties into the Gulf of Mexico, there's something called the dead zone. It's an area that's, gosh, I don't know how many, it's like 6,000 or 8,000 square miles now, where nothing lives. No fish, no crabs, no oysters, nothing is alive in there. And why is this the case? It's because of all the fertilizer residue washing down the Mississippi River. It's not the pesticides, it's simply the fertilizers that, through sort of a bloom and bust cycle, have destroyed all the life out there. Okay, let's take organic fertilizers. Organic fertilizers, most of the nutrient in them is in what we call the ammoniacal form, rather than the cation form, which means they have a positive charge. When you put the Medina granular, or the Texas tea, or the ladybug, when you put these fertilizers down, you've got positive and negative. And so what happens? It hits, it binds, the fertilizer stays in the soil until the plant's ready to use it. Then the plant has this miraculous process where it in effect releases a stronger charge, a hydrogen ion, breaks the fertilizer free and uses it. So everybody says, oh, organic fertilizers, they pollute too much, they've got cow poop in them. Well, number one, they don't have cow poop in them for the most part. And number two, they don't fertilize, they don't pollute because they stay bound to the soil until the plants use them. It's chemical fertilizers that do the polluting. Just in case anybody was thinking about using chemical fertilizers on your garden, that's why I tell you that to start this off. But the way that I get things ready in the vegetable garden is I'll put down a good layer of an organic fertilizer, and the Medina is what I happen to use the great majority of the time. In all honesty, I get the busted bags. The bags the guys hit with the forklift and things like that, those go to my garden. That's why I don't fuss at them too much when they bust open a few bags. But anyway, that's the fertilizer I use. I will put down a layer of that where I'm going to be planting things in a row. like onions or lettuce seed or radishes or beets or something like that, then I will just go and in effect cover that area with a 1 to 2 inch layer of good compost. Where I'm going to be planting individual plants like broccoli and cauliflower and things like that, everywhere that I'm going to be planting, I'll put down maybe a cup of fertilizer. I'll dump about 1/3 of a bag of compost on top of that, and I just go along and make all these little mounds along there. Same thing I do with tomato plants and peppers in the spring. I'll go back and I'll kind of make a little crater in the